On a quiet afternoon, in a city where the gleam of wealth casts long shadows over those forgotten, a single act of compassion begins to rewrite two very different lives. Emily, raised in a world of privilege, notices a young man named Ethan sitting alone on a busy sidewalk. His eyes, reflecting a quiet sorrow, reveal a story of struggle and survival. Without a second thought, Emily offers him a simple piece of bread, a small gesture that speaks volumes about her belief that no one should be left hungry or unseen. At Acts of Kindness Stories, we share moments that remind us how a spark of generosity can bridge worlds. Today's story is one of unexpected connection and quiet determination, a reminder that even in the harsh glare of city lights, compassion can shine through and change everything. In the weeks following that singular afternoon when Emily first extended a warm, gentle offering of bread to Ethan on a sunlit sidewalk, the fabric of their worlds began to intertwine in ways neither had anticipated. Every day, as the city stirred with its daily rhythm, a city that both dazzled with prosperity and concealed the sorrows of its unseen inhabitants, Emily found herself drawn to the same familiar corner. There, beneath the hum of passing cars and the distant chatter of busy pedestrians, she encountered Ethan again. His presence was quiet yet impossible to ignore, a silent testament to resilience amid hardship. Though the street offered little comfort, it became a canvas on which an unlikely bond would slowly be painted. Each encounter unfolded like a carefully written chapter. In the early days, Emily's visits were hesitant, a pause in her otherwise carefully curated life of luxury. She carried with her simple packages of sustenance, modest parcels of nourishment that bridged the gulf between her opulent existence and his stark reality. Ethan, initially guarded and reticent, gradually revealed subtle signs of trust. His eyes, once hardened by the relentless toll of survival, began to soften as he recognized the sincerity behind her gestures. As days melted into weeks, the routine of their meetings acquired a quiet rhythm that spoke of unspoken understanding and shared loneliness. In those moments, the city's noise faded, replaced by the gentle pulse of a connection that transcended the glaring differences in their lives. As the seasons began to shift, so too did the nature of their encounters. Emily's visits became more frequent and less burdened by the formalities of her privileged upbringing. The routine of her world, exclusive galas, impeccably choreographed family dinners, and an existence carefully managed by those who valued status over substance, was slowly punctured by the raw, unadorned reality of Ethan's life. In the delicate space between what was expected of her and what she truly felt, Emily discovered a sense of liberation. Each day spent at that same familiar corner, sharing in the quiet communion of a shared moment, served as a counterpoint to the hollow perfection of her family's legacy. Yet, the budding connection did not escape the ever-watchful eyes of those who thrived on control and conformity. Far removed from the small acts of kindness unfolding on the city streets, Emily's father, a man known for his implacable demeanor and unwavering insistence on order, began to notice the subtle changes in his daughter's behavior. His eyes, long accustomed to a world defined by boundaries and unyielding social codes, soon perceived a threat in the form of Ethan's growing influence over Emily. The disparity between the two worlds, so stark in its contrast, had always been accepted as a natural order. But when that order was challenged by the unexpected tenderness of a shared smile, it stirred something darker within him, a desire to restore the divisions he had spent a lifetime enforcing. Unbeknownst to Emily, her father set in motion a series of actions designed to sever the thread of connection that bound her to Ethan. Under the guise of protecting his daughter from the perceived dangers of an unregulated world, he deployed his considerable resources to ensure that Ethan would no longer be a fixture on the streets. His operatives, men whose presence was as cold as the polished surfaces of his luxurious offices, were dispatched with an unequivocal directive: remove the influence of the street and, with it, the growing hope that Emily dared to nurture. The subtle menace of his interventions began to cast a long shadow over the once safe haven of their daily meetings. In the quiet hours before dusk, when the city's clamor subsided into a reflective hush, Ethan's routine took on an ominous undertone. One evening, as he sat in his habitual spot, his presence as unassuming as ever, two well-dressed figures emerged from the darkness. Their attire, incongruous with the worn textures of the alleyway, spoke of a world of power and privilege. The silence that had so often accompanied Ethan's solitary vigil was shattered by the cold precision of their actions. Without a word, the men conveyed a clear, unyielding message. The ties that bound Ethan to the street, and by extension to Emily, had become a liability. The threat was implicit in every measured step they took, each movement designed to enforce an invisible boundary that had been drawn by forces far beyond the control of those on the pavement. In the days that followed, the familiar presence of Ethan began to wane. The street corner, once marked by the quiet certainty of his routine, grew increasingly empty. Emily's attempts to return, each visit laced with the hope that the unspoken ritual would resume, were met by a palpable absence. The space that had once cradled a fragile but potent bond now bore only the faint imprint of a memory. It was as if the city itself had conspired to erase the man whose existence had challenged the status quo, leaving behind only traces of a promise that once bridged two disparate worlds. For Emily, the disappearance of Ethan was not a mere absence. It was a profound void that swallowed the brightness of her days. Within the polished confines of her family's estate, the world continued to turn in a clockwork fashion. Yet, beneath the veneer of opulence, every moment was tinged with the bitter realization of a connection abruptly severed. The laughter that once came easily now faltered in the presence of a silence that spoke louder than any words ever could. Every carefully arranged event, every dinner filled with the predictable cadence of wealth and power, stood in stark contrast to the unpredictable, raw emotion that had once lit up her eyes whenever she thought of him. In the midst of that inner turmoil, Emily found herself at a crossroads. Her days became a delicate balancing act between the expectations thrust upon her by a world of privilege and the lingering memory of Ethan, a memory that had grown into a beacon of authenticity in an otherwise meticulously constructed life. The absence of his physical presence did little to diminish the intensity of his influence. Instead, it transformed into a force that pushed her to question everything she had been taught to accept as immutable. Every glance around the city, a city that boasted soaring towers and meticulously manicured parks, reminded her of the fragility of the bonds that held her captive in a life preordained by wealth and control. As the months slipped by, Emily's internal journey led her down unexpected paths. No longer content with the superficial niceties of high society, she began to seek out the stories that lay hidden beneath the surface. Driven by a desire to expose the unvarnished truth, she immersed herself in the plight of those who had long been ignored by the glittering facades of power. Her work as a journalist became more than just a career. It evolved into a mission, a calling to give voice to the voiceless and to illuminate the dark corners of a society that prized appearance over substance. In every article she penned and every injustice she uncovered, there echoed a resonant reminder of the man she had lost and the promise of what might have been if the threads of fate had not been forcibly severed. During this period of self-discovery, Emily found that the quest for truth was often laden with personal sacrifice. The more she delved into the stories of the city's underbelly, the stories of hunger, neglect, and unseen struggle, the more she felt the weight of her own guilt and regret. It was as if the absence of Ethan was not just a personal void but a symbol of a larger injustice. The systemic dismissal of those whose lives were defined by poverty and marginalization. In the quiet solitude of her research and reflection, the lines between personal pain and societal failure blurred, and she began to understand that the act of giving, however small, held the potential to ignite transformative change. Yet, even as Emily dedicated herself to this noble cause, the memory of Ethan remained an ever-present ghost in her thoughts. His laughter, the unguarded moments they had shared on the cracked pavement, and the silent communication of mutual understanding were etched indelibly into her consciousness. Every step she took on her path toward social justice carried the bittersweet weight of what might have been, a life intertwined with another in a way that transcended the rigid constructs of class and circumstance. The absence of his physical presence was counterbalanced by the enduring imprint of his spirit, which continued to challenge her assumptions and fuel her determination to fight for a more compassionate world. The turning point in their intertwined destinies came one fateful night when the delicate balance of Emily's world was violently disrupted. In the midst of a relentless storm that bathed the city in a downpour of rain and uncertainty, Emily found herself hurtling through the darkened streets in a car that had become as much a part of her life as the relentless pursuit of truth. The familiar route, one that had always provided a semblance of control, suddenly transformed into a blur of lights and shattered glass. The impact was brutal, a cacophony of metal colliding with metal, of lives upended in a single terrifying moment. In that instant, the delicate balance between fate and free will shifted irrevocably. In the chaos that followed, the world seemed to pause as time stretched out in a series of excruciating slow-motion moments. Emily's body, battered and broken by the collision, was lifted from the wreckage into a realm where pain and hope coexisted in a fragile equilibrium. The hospital that became her sanctuary in those critical hours was a place of frenetic activity, a space where life and death danced in a precarious embrace. Amid the orchestrated urgency of doctors and nurses, one figure moved with deliberate calm, a man whose every action spoke of a lifetime spent battling adversity. Ethan, now a figure transformed by years of struggle and relentless determination, had emerged from the crucible of his own hardships to become a healer. No longer was he the quiet, cautious youth on the street. He had reinvented himself as a dedicated doctor whose expertise and compassion were as evident in his steady hands as they were in the resolute depth of his eyes. As Ethan worked tirelessly in the operating room, the memories of those long-ago afternoons resurfaced with an intensity that defied time. Every precise movement, every calculated decision in the midst of medical chaos, was imbued with the weight of a past that refused to remain buried. The act of saving a life had become both a professional duty and a deeply personal mission, a silent vow that the threads of fate, once torn apart by forces beyond their control, could still be woven back together. In the sterile glow of the hospital lights, as monitors beeped in a steady rhythm and the scent of antiseptic filled the air, the two paths that had diverged so long ago converged in a moment that was as unexpected as it was fateful. Emily's recovery was marked by fragile awakenings and the slow return of consciousness in a place where every breath was a testament to survival. In the quiet solitude of her hospital room, the harsh reality of her situation mingled with the vivid recollection of a past that had once promised hope and connection. The weight of all that had transpired, the years of silent longing, the bitter taste of loss, the relentless pursuit of truth, settled over her like a shroud. Yet, even amid the haze of pain and uncertainty, there remained a spark, a quiet defiance against the forces that had sought to sever the ties of their shared history. Ethan's presence in that room was more than a professional necessity. It was a symbol of everything that had been reclaimed from the abyss of neglect and despair. As he moved methodically through the tasks of healing, every action was a silent acknowledgement of the promises made on cold, unyielding sidewalks so many years before. In the midst of life-saving procedures and clinical precision, the memories of sunlit afternoons, shared moments of vulnerability, and the quiet power of a simple act of kindness came rushing back. Each heartbeat in that room was a reminder of a connection that, despite all odds, had endured the relentless march of time and the heavy hand of destiny. The aftermath of that fateful collision forced Emily to confront the painful truth of what had been lost, and what could still be salvaged. The sterile corridors of the hospital bore witness to the slow, determined process of recovery, both physical and emotional. Every step taken by the recovering patient, every cautious glance toward the doorway where a familiar figure stood vigil, was imbued with the unspoken hope that time might yet heal old wounds. The silence that stretched between the past and the present was no longer an expanse of desolation, but a fragile bridge spanning the distance between regret and redemption. Over days that blended into nights, as the rain continued its unending cadence outside, Emily's memories intermingled with the present in a delicate dance of recognition and remorse. The remnants of a life that had once been defined by separation began to coalesce into something new, a possibility of reconciliation, of rebuilding a bond that had been all but destroyed by the callous machinations of power. The healing process was slow, filled with moments of painful clarity and the bittersweet knowledge that nothing could ever truly restore what had been taken away. Yet, in the midst of that pain, there flickered a determination that would not be extinguished, a promise that the truth, however raw and unvarnished, deserved to be known. Throughout this arduous journey, the narrative of two lives, once separated by circumstances beyond their control, grew ever more intertwined. Emily's transformation from a sheltered daughter of privilege into a resolute seeker of truth was mirrored in Ethan's evolution from a silent survivor on the streets to a dedicated guardian of life. Their individual battles against the forces that had once sought to dictate their fates became emblematic of a larger struggle: the fight for dignity, the pursuit of justice, and the enduring power of human connection in a world that often prized appearances over authenticity. In the wake of the accident, as the hospital's atmosphere shifted from frantic urgency to a measured calm, the past and the present merged in ways that defied conventional boundaries. The memory of every shared moment, the gentle exchange of food on a cold day, the silent acknowledgement of pain and hope, the unspoken promise that transcended the constraints of class and circumstance, became the foundation upon which a new future could be built. Each day that passed in the sterile quiet of recovery was a step toward reclaiming the identity that had been denied so long ago. In that space, Emily's determination to honor the memory of what had been lost met Ethan's commitment to live fully in the present, forging a partnership that was as much about healing as it was about defiance against a past that had tried to erase their very souls. As the days turned to weeks and the once impenetrable walls of isolation began to crumble, a new narrative emerged from the crucible of pain and perseverance. The memories that had once haunted the long, desolate corridors of their separate lives now lit the way forward, a future where the scars of betrayal could serve as a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. The quiet moments in the hospital room, punctuated by the steady rhythm of recovery and the soft murmur of encouragement from unseen allies, laid the groundwork for a transformation that was both personal and profound. In that fragile interlude between despair and hope, every heartbeat became a declaration that no force, no matter how powerful or controlling, could ever fully erase the traces of kindness that had brought them together. The remnants of a stolen past, preserved in faded letters and the indelible impressions left on cold sidewalks, evolved into the seeds of a future defined by choice, agency, and the enduring power of empathy. Each memory, every shared moment of unspoken understanding, was a quiet reminder that true connection transcends the superficial boundaries imposed by society. It is in these delicate spaces, where vulnerability meets strength, that the essence of humanity is most clearly revealed. The narrative of Emily and Ethan, now etched into the fabric of their lives by both joy and sorrow, stood as a beacon of possibility in a world where many had resigned themselves to the inevitability of separation. The painful lessons of the past, once a source of bitter regret, transformed into a call to action, a reminder that the choices made in the face of injustice can pave the way for a more compassionate and inclusive future. As each day unfolded with the promise of healing, the story that had begun on a quiet afternoon blossomed into an enduring testament to the transformative power of love, determination, and the unyielding belief that every life, regardless of its origins, is worthy of being seen and cherished. In the soft glow of the hospital's evening light, as shadows danced along the sterile walls and the steady hum of recovery underscored the fragility of life, the bond between the two souls grew stronger. The physical distance that had once threatened to separate them was now bridged by an inner resolve that neither wealth nor power could ever dismantle. The echoes of every kind gesture, every quiet moment of shared truth, resonated deeply within them, fostering a renewed sense of purpose that transcended the limitations of their past. It was in that sacred space of vulnerability and courage that they found the strength to reclaim not only their individual identities, but also the connection that had been unjustly severed. This long journey, from the desperate edges of the city's forgotten alleys to the bright, sterile corridors of the hospital, became a living testament to the idea that compassion, when nurtured with unwavering faith, can overcome even the most formidable barriers. The story, as it unfolded in each quiet heartbeat and in every determined step toward healing, affirmed that every act of kindness carries within it the promise of redemption. In the absence of a simple reunion on a familiar street corner, the spirit of their connection endured, evolving into a force that could mend even the deepest wounds inflicted by years of separation and control. The narrative continued to build layer upon layer, as Emily's quest for truth intertwined with Ethan's unwavering commitment to save lives. Their separate struggles, once isolated in their respective worlds of privilege and hardship, merged into a singular narrative of resilience, a story that defied the expectations of a society that sought to keep them apart. In the quiet moments of reflection during long nights of recovery, and in the silent determination that fueled every effort to rebuild what had been lost, the enduring impact of their first meeting emerged as a guiding light. It was a reminder that, even in the face of overwhelming obstacles, the human heart possesses the remarkable capacity to forgive, to heal, and ultimately to forge a future defined by the choices we make rather than the circumstances we inherit. Every aspect of this journey, from the initial spark of compassion on a crowded city street to the painstaking process of rebuilding a life shattered by the cold machinations of power, served as a lesson in the transformative nature of empathy. The gradual evolution of their relationship, marked by small but significant acts of courage, revealed a truth that resonated far beyond the confines of their individual stories: that the genuine warmth of human connection is the most powerful antidote to the isolation and despair wrought by a world too often governed by indifference. In the unfolding narrative, the scars of the past were not hidden away but acknowledged as integral parts of a larger mosaic, a tapestry of experiences that underscored the resilience of the human spirit. With each new day, as Emily poured her heart into exposing the overlooked truths of a society too enamored with appearances, and as Ethan poured his skill and compassion into the noble art of healing, the invisible ties that bound them together grew ever stronger. Their shared history, marred by forced separations and the cold edicts of power, now served as the bedrock upon which a new future was being built, a future where love, truth, and a steadfast commitment to justice reigned supreme. The echoes of that fateful afternoon, the gentle exchange of bread, the quiet determination in a pair of searching eyes, became the unspoken anthem of their intertwined destinies. In a world where the disparity between wealth and poverty often dictated the course of one's life, their story emerged as a powerful reminder that the most profound changes begin with the simplest acts of kindness. It was a narrative that defied the conventional boundaries imposed by society, offering instead a vision of a future where every life was valued and every connection celebrated. As the hospital room slowly filled with a soft glow of hope and recovery, the unyielding determination to rewrite the narrative of loss and abandonment began to take shape. Each measured breath, each quiet moment of introspection, and every determined step toward healing served as a silent declaration that the past would no longer dictate the terms of the future. In the interplay of light and shadow on the sterile walls, the story of Emily and Ethan evolved from a mere recollection of what had been to a vibrant tapestry of possibility, an enduring testament to the fact that, when nurtured by unwavering compassion, even the most fractured souls can find their way back to one another. Thus, within the corridors of a hospital that bore witness to both despair and hope, a profound transformation was underway. The silence that had once symbolized the painful absence of a connection now became the backdrop against which the future was being written. Each day that passed was imbued with the promise of new beginnings, a quiet assurance that, regardless of the forces that sought to keep them apart, the bond forged in a moment of shared vulnerability could never be truly broken. And in that promise, there lay the enduring message that every act of kindness, no matter how small, has the power to change lives, challenge injustice, and ultimately, to bring us all a little closer to the truth of our shared humanity. In the quiet aftermath of a storm that reshaped their worlds, Emily and Ethan found themselves standing at the crossroads of past pain and future promise. The scars of separation and the bitterness of loss slowly gave way to a renewed determination, a shared commitment to rebuild what had once been stolen. In that sacred space of vulnerability, where every heartbeat echoed the memory of kindness and every step was laden with hope, they embraced the truth that love and compassion could mend even the deepest wounds. Their journey, marked by relentless struggle and unwavering faith in one another, had transformed not only their lives but also the very fabric of a society too long divided by invisible barriers. As days turned into a steady cadence of recovery and rediscovery, the remnants of their former lives began to dissolve into the background. The cold structures of power that once dictated every moment were now nothing more than echoes in a memory, a past that could not dim the light of genuine connection. In every gentle touch, every shared glance, and every silent understanding, Emily and Ethan rebuilt their world. Their story became a beacon for those who dared to believe that the simplest acts of kindness could spark profound change, proving that every life holds the power to transform the world when love leads the way. If this story has touched your heart and reminded you of the enduring strength of compassion, please take a moment to like, share, and leave your thoughts in the comments below. Your support helps us continue bringing stories that inspire and connect. Don't forget to subscribe to Trend Story Life. Let's reach 1,000 likes together and spread the message that every act of kindness can light the way to a brighter future.